In this lesson, we'll learn about the jiggle deformer. The jiggle deformer is going to create a follow-through type of shake on the object or component you apply it to. So for instance, if I were to hit play in this scene, we have our character's mouth opening. And what we'll do is add the jiggle deformer to a few of the vertices underneath the character's jaw, just to make this look more lifelike. So this is going to be pretty neat. Let's go ahead and select the mesh. Then we'll go to component mode, pressing F8. Now at this point, we can use something like, let's say, the paint selection tool to paint on the components we would like to add the jiggle on. So to make sure we get this loose skin, we'll also grab areas around the loose skin. That way, if we ever wanted to, we can come back and paint weight on the jiggle deformer so that it doesn't affect the points as much, but at the same time so that there's at least a little bit of movement there. And if you'd like to learn more about the paint jiggle weights tool, we have a lesson on that. Alright, so I'm just going to go in and grab just a few of these points. See, that looks pretty good. Okay, great. So with all of these selected, we can now go to Create Deformers and choose the Jiggle Deformer. Taking a look at the options, notice we can adjust the stiffness. This is the springiness of the jiggle, or how rigid it will behave. And then we could also adjust its damping factor, which is basically how loose it will behave. And of course we have control over the weight or the scale of the jiggle. And then we can have our objects jiggle after, let's say, animation. So for instance, if you're working on a really complex animation, there's a lot going on, and then the character suddenly stops, well, you'll still want some follow-through and overlapping for realism. So what would happen then is the jiggle would trigger afterwards, and then there's an attribute we can adjust to make sure that we get the jiggle we need, to make sure that after the motion has stopped, we still get the right amount of jiggle happening after that performance. So I'll show you how to do that. And then ignore transform. This is simply going to ignore the X form that the jiggle deformer is tied to. So we have that choice as well. Let's go ahead and choose create. And what we'll do from here is come out of component mode, pressing F8. May need to exit our brush tool. It's no problem at all. I'll just press the Q key to go to our select tool. When we press F8, we're back in object mode. And now if we hit play, we'll notice a little jiggle on our jaw. Now, what's happening right now? It appears to not stop at all. I don't know if I like this deformer too much. Well, nothing to worry about. We just need to adjust a few of the settings, and this is going to look good in no time at all. So selecting our mesh, we can head over to our channel box and adjust some of our parameters from here. So we see a few more settings that we saw before. Enable, this is how we can disable our jiggle if we like, or have the jiggle occur after the motion stops. So if we disable it, of course, we're not going to see any jiggle at all. Or if we'd like to see jiggle after the animation, we can go ahead and use that option. It may take another loop from the animation before we actually see that happen, but there's a little bit there, and I'll show you how to adjust that. We already discussed ignore transform. Then we could also force the jiggle along the normal scale or normal direction. And then we can do the same thing along the tangent plane. So we have those two settings. The motion multiplier. This is what we would use when we have our enable set to enable only after objects stops. So for instance, hitting play, when that stops, you see hardly any jiggle there, but if we were to increase this motion multiplier, let's say to about a value of 20, just so we can really see what this does, when we hit play, now when the animation stops, there's more jiggle there. So you get an idea of what that attribute does. And again, this would be great for more complex scenes or more complex performances. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to 1. We won't need it in this case, and I'll set the enable parameter back to enable. We already discussed stiffness and also damping. Chances are we're probably going to want to decrease both of these, and we'll also want to adjust our jiggle weight. This is the reason why the jiggle appeared to keep going and to just not stop. So if we were to go ahead and cycle through again, notice how the jiggle just keeps going. But if we were to just go ahead and decrease this jiggle weight to even, let's say 90%, 0.9, and hit play, that looks much better already. So you may want to just go in and decrease that value just a little bit to have the jiggle behave the way you like it to. But to talk a little bit more about stiffness and damping, because these are very important fields. So for instance, if we were to take the stiffness and bring this up to, let's say, 1 and hit play, you'll notice that we get a very rigid shake. So chances are we're going to want to bring this down a little bit more, maybe to about a value of 0.2, 20%, to kind of smooth that out. Much better. That looks more flesh-like. So with damping, again, this is like our flabby control. So if we were to increase this to a high amount of 1, again, that looks very shaky. Doesn't quite appear to be skin. So what we could do in this case is go ahead and bring this also to about 20% and get something that appears more like loose skin. Beautiful. Now, another thing we need to discuss is the direction bias. This is basically a control we can use if we're running into a lot of self-penetration. So if you have some interpenetration occurring throughout your jiggle, you may want to increase your direction bias to remove some of it. And that's one way you can avoid penetration. Another way is to get in and actually adjust your weights manually from the component editor or by using the Paint Jiggle Weights tool. But again, that's a look at the Jiggle Deformer. Again, a great tool for adding that natural looking follow through and overlapping action that we would get on, let's say, loose skin. This would be great to use also for hair or, let's say, an antenna on a vehicle. So you have a lot of choices, maybe a rope even, or it's really a matter of your creativity. So you might want to have some fun and experiment with what else you can use this deformer for.